hating myself and I am now basically homeless. Warning, some audiences may find this content disturbing. View at your own discretion. Welcome to the House of Reddit. Today, we share some recent r/TodayIFuckedUp stories posted on Reddit. Hating myself and I am now basically homeless. In childhood no one seemed to like me. I had the occasional friend here and there, but I was mostly ignored by everyone. This caused me to develop a self-hatred and a severe low self-esteem that stayed with me well into adulthood, and I am now jobless and basically homeless. In my 20s the way people saw me completely turned around, but I could not accept this new loving and accepting nature from other people. I rejected dozens of relationship opportunities and career opportunities. I dropped out of college numerous times. I declined job offers from professors. Women that I could have dated, I turned them into friendships because I could not accept that anyone would ever like me like that. It didn't matter if they asked me to go on dates with them or kiss me, or even take me to the bedroom. I could not accept that they viewed me any differently than when I was a teenager. I am now in my mid-30s and I have no job and am basically homeless. When I think about all the relationships that I could have had, it is extremely painful and I regret every second of the last 15 or so years. I can't believe that I have done this to myself. If you are a young adult and you hate yourself and or have low self-esteem, if people treated you poorly when you were a child, and that affects the way you perceive yourself now, you need to reread this post a dozen times and realize that this is what you are going to turn yourself into if you don't develop the courage and confidence to overcome your self-hatred and low self-esteem. I wanted relationships and I wanted a good fulfilling career, and when I was offered those things over and over and over again I turned them down like it was nothing because I had a set idea about what I deserved, and that is that I deserved nothing. I wasn't capable, I'm not cool, I'm ugly, I'm a loser, I'm not intelligent. These are thoughts that would be playing in my head constantly, even when I aced tests, or when I was with women. It was non-stop because I could not accept who I actually was, and I certainly could not accept the way that other people perceived me. Now I am frantically trying to turn around my life that has been an ironic tragedy into what I wanted it to be, but this time I hope I can accept the opportunities that come my way. I'm worried that I won't be able to do it, that I will always be stuck in this low self-opinion thinking. I'm worried that there will be too many obstacles in my way. It's going to be very hard, but I am going to do it and I want it. I want the life that was offered to me 15 years ago. I hope that everyone who reads this and says to themselves that sounds like me, or that could be the path I am heading on, you stop what you are doing and find the courage within yourself to do what is the right thing to do for your future self. Go on a hike, go for a long walk, climb a mountain and think about your inner courage and aptitude, and your strength. Analyze the way you have been treating yourself and sabotaging yourself. You need to do this for yourself so that you do not end up wasting your life for 15 years and then realizing in your 30s that you were your own worst enemy. It's a bad idea to help my father dig in the backyard. I rented a backhoe for the weekend to do some work and my dad asked me to bring it by because he wanted a drainage trench dug. I got there and dug the trench without issue, but my dad suddenly had another idea. He explained to me that back in the 70s, when he first built the house he had buried a lead-lined cooler in the backyard, and he was concerned about the lead contamination. I asked him where the cooler was and he pointed to a general area of the yard. I began digging holes throughout his search zone without luck. After about an hour of digging what seemed to be random holes, jackpot. The backhoe found the cooler and busted it into pieces. Another thing my father neglected to mention to me was that this was during his hobbyist taxidermy phase. It turned out that one weekend the power went out and the freezer he had unprepared deer hides in thawed out. His thinking was to put the deer hides in a cooler and bury it in the backyard to dispose of the deer hides. Fast forward to 45 years and the cooler that contained deer hides now contained a rancid liquid that sat in wait for an unsuspecting person to dig up years later. When the liquid oozed out, this heavy overpowering putrid smell of death, worse than a bloated whale covered in chicken shit and rotten eggs, began to overtake my senses. I gagged, my dad gagged, and I decided I'd had enough and was out of there. I put the backhoe on the trailer and left. The liquefied deer carcass was covering the backhoe's bucket and followed me home. From the driveway the smell began to flow into my house and soon enough my neighbor was outside asking if something died on my property. I explained what happened and hosed the backhoe off. The next morning I headed back over to my parents' house. I was at least a 1/4 mile away and the pungent smell of death began to enter my nostrils. The closer I got to my parents, the stronger the smell. Overhead, at least a dozen turkey vultures were circling my parents' property. By the time I got to their house I couldn't breathe, the stench was so bad. I ran into the house to find my mother waiting for me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" my mother yells at me. She began flipping out on me since I was the one operating the backhoe and broke open the time bomb. She hadn't slept all night and the neighbors all around were pissed. She then told me that the local police had paid a visit out of concern expressed by the neighbors. I promised from that moment on I would not entertain any of my dad's dimwit ideas. The smell took 3 days to disappear from the neighborhood and another 2 days after that to disappear from my parents' property. Best friend find the mystery smell in my basement. I had some virtual work training to do, thanks COVID, and so did my best friend. So we decided to conduct our virtual training together while getting some things done around my house. I had a smell in the basement that I just couldn't seem to put my finger on. It was pretty rank, so I asked him to lend a nose to help me find it during the downtime throughout the day. So we started out sniffing around. I cleaned the litter boxes out really well. No unusual stink there. He pulled out all of the boxes that store the Christmas ornaments, etc. in case one of the cat's meals had escaped and then perished. Nope, nothing hidden. We pulled out the washer hose, scrubbed the utility sink, pulled apart the shelves, even opened up the access in the bottom of the chimney and stuck hands and flashlights up there to try to find something. We tried everything and still nothing. Still stinky, but after a full clean of the basement, we just couldn't figure it out. The only place we hadn't looked was the sump in the corner of the basement. So I pulled on a pair of work gloves, and yanked up the top, ready to find all manner of things. But that was a letdown too. It was dry as a bone and still as clean as a drain in your basement can be. But the smell was there, and getting stronger. Now let me explain the smell. Picture belly button lint left to fester for 50 years in a fat man's navel. Picture that cave of bat guano that David Attenborough spoke about in Planet Earth. Picture Satan's prolapsed asshole. Those descriptions don't really scratch the surface of that odor. While pondering our life decisions that brought us to that point, he likely regretting that the army ever introduced us, and me wondering who the hell puts a gaping hole in the basement anyway. My bestie shifts, and bumps into the hose that leads from the sump pump to the outside of the house. It's full of liquid. That's odd. So being a nice fellow, he lets me know and we proceed to try to flush it out. No dice. Looks like we'll have to pull the hose. Being a taller lad, he grabs the top, and gives it a good yank while I collect a bucket to drain the water into. What happened next is almost beyond words. When the hose let loose from the side of the house, out poured the most noxious, hellish stench I have ever had the misfortune of smelling. But not only a stench came forth, but also a gush of blackish sludge. Cue intense dry heaving from both unwitting humans and a scattering of the 2 cats who had been watching us with somewhat amused indifference. Being that he is holding a hose full of God only knows what, he can't flee as the cats have done. Being a good friend, I can't flee either, leaving my comrade to deal with that particular perfumey soup. So we devise a plan in between the heaves that are still occurring. We'll hold the hose/bucket/pump, and sprint for the door. So we do. We run like Usain Bolt. But as we do so, the hose is flicking its particular form of bilge water onto us. It's like a fucking color run, but instead of colored powder, we are being showered in wastewater and broken dreams. In a black spray of what can only be described accurately as putrefaction, we make it outside. Now stinking in a way that is indescribable. I won't even try. So we get the hose disconnected, still retching, and take the garden hose to flush the demons from its depths. And what comes next may be the most disgusting thing I have ever encountered. The congealed remains of what likely amounted to dozens of mice came barreling out of the end of the hose. Mouse shards, bone, fur, and liquefied guts spilled onto the lawn. Screw never leaving your comrade, we both bolted. After much airing out, we pitched the hose, that shit went straight into the trash. And no, I don't even feel guilty about not recycling that after what that hose had seen. It could never be resurrected into a poor unknowing consumer plastic good. It was a goner. For the rest of the day you could still smell us, even after showering. When we went for a run later, the stench re-emerged, oozing out of our pores. So here I sit, writing this to you, and still surreptitiously sniffing myself and my surroundings, catching phantom whiffs of the eau de mouse that will never leave me. In the end though, I still have my friend, surprisingly, And now have to fill a hole in the side of my house with a new hose, one with a cap or something that the mice won't get into, and then drown in a soup of their deceased relatives. Some things can't be unseen. Or unsmelled in this case. Starting a rumor at work. A few years ago I was working at this fancy country club/golf course as a waiter. I actually loved the job and the people, but it was really stressful. Customers were really nice, but the expectations for their fine dining were really strict, and there was a bit of fighting with the staff because of tips and fighting for tables who we knew were good tippers. It was a private club, so everyone was a regular member, so we knew them all pretty well. There was this realty sweet old lady named Jane who had been there for a while, and she was always very positive. I enjoyed working with her, and she had actually trained me. While training she was really bossy and a bit demanding, but after training was done I realized she was actually very kind and she always helped out. The reason I bring up the stressful portion of the job and the fighting is because we were losing quite a bit of staff left and right. We would hire a server or a bartender, and with all the bickering and the stress they would quit after like a week or two. Some would just walk off the job when it got to be too much. We had a really bad week where we had 3 new hires quit within the month, and we were all in the kitchen talking about it. One of the waitresses said, "Oh yeah, and there was that girl who punched Jane and then left." I was shocked because I hadn't seen Jane in a while and I didn't know that an employee had physically assaulted her. It was a busy night, but I said something like, "What, that's so bad? Poor Jane, I can't believe someone would do that." The server gave me a weird look, but then she had to get back to her table, and I couldn't believe that nobody was reacting to the news. That place was filled with gossip, and I couldn't believe I hadn't heard about Jane being punched in the face at work. I asked one of the bartenders where Jane had been and he didn't know. I told him, "Man, I can't believe someone hit her in the face." He hadn't heard about it either, so I told him. He was shocked and he felt really bad. Anyways, anyone who has ever played telephone knows how it goes. The rumor went around that Jane had been punched in the face by a waitress and nobody had heard about it. Of course management got involved because it's definitely something that they have to get involved in. Filling out incident reports and all that jazz. When Jane came in the next day, she had no idea what people were talking about. People traced it back to me, and then I traced it back to the waitress who clarified. I said she punched in and left. I never said she punched Jane. I died of embarrassment, and I don't know to this day why I added in the face. My dad always told me to stay out of gossip in the workplace, and I always took pride in doing so. But here I was starting a pretty serious rumor about the old lady at work. I thought I was in trouble, but management spoke to me and laughed it off, so it was okay. I apologized to Jane and she was kind of upset about it because she didn't like being brought in to speak to management about something that never happened. I worked there for another year and everyone always brought up the time I told people that Jane got socked in the face. Deleting a ton of files off my friend's laptop permanently. My friend and I are in grad school together, and today he came to me with his laptop hoping that I could help him out. This isn't unusual, and as the tech guy in my social group I usually get all sorts of requests to clean and or repair my friend's software/hardware. Very cliché, I know. His laptop was generally fine, and his slowdowns really were just due to his drivers being out of date and his version of Windows 10 not having been updated in a couple years. It took me about an hour, but I updated his Windows 10 to the latest release. I updated his drivers, updated his BIOS, and I was feeling pretty good about the whole thing, to be honest. And to be clear, this is all very routine and I'm in no way flexing that I can run a Windows update. Now, this is where the fuck up happened. After all the upgrades were done, I did what I always do and I ran the disk cleanup tool to clear off all the old files, mainly his Windows old folder, which is like 30 gigabytes. I ran it, it worked great, and I verified that his free space was back and handed him back his computer. That's when his grin faded and he looked at me in horror. It turns out, my buddy had been using the recycle bin as the place where he stores all his working copies of files. Yes, you heard me. Not the desktop, not the documents folder, but the recycle bin. You see, disk cleanup as part of its cleaning process automatically marks the recycle bin for clearing. I didn't uncheck the box to keep it from clearing it out because why would I? Who in their right mind uses the recycle bin to store their important files? So anyway, my buddy is freaking out about the files he lost, but now, after a few hours, he's being pretty reasonable about the whole thing. At first he tried to put the blame all on me and was vigorously explaining how not weird it is to use the recycle bin to store his files. Though, the more he spoke, I think the more he realized how dumb he sounded. Given that he's not in a good mood, I resisted the urge to fight back, but I think he now realizes it was a pretty foolish thing to do. Anyway, now I'm trying to look up some data recovery tools to use. I pulled the drive from the laptop and have it mounted read-only in my workstation to try to salvage what I can with whatever tools I can find. If anyone knows any Windows or Linux data recovery tools, please post them below. I also told him about sending the drive to a professional data recovery specialist, but he already shot that idea down after looking at the price and turnaround time, so here we are. If you enjoy this video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for future videos, please let us know in the comments below. Turn on the notifications to know when we post new videos. Thank you for coming to the House of Reddit.